The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com's weekly sale. And you should head over to StarCityGames.com/sale, that's SALE, right now. Because now, until October 17th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, you can save 10% off of every single sealed product on the website. That is right. 10% off every single sealed product. Now, this is only while supplies last, okay? So once something sells out, it's gone. 2, you can't get pre-order items. I know we're all excited about Crimson Vow, but gotta wait a little bit longer. 3, again, quickly hurry, because these sales aren't going to last long. From now until October 17th, 11:59 p.m., 10% off of all sealed products site-wide. Hurry before it is too late.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, you know, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more. Before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. Head over to coalesceapparel.shop and use gift code SCG at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. If you want to rep the coolest Magic the Gathering themed hoodies and t-shirts or stickers, head over to coalesceapparel.shop. Maybe you want to rep our fallen friend Golos with the Tireless Pilgrim versus the Multiverse shirt, or maybe you're Wooburg Forever and you want to go with the South Beach collection. Any way you want to do it. Anti-Mulligan Club, we got you. MTG Jam, of course. And all of the Keeping It 100 line, there for you, coalesceapparel.shop. Use gift code SCG at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves. Welcome back, one and all, to part 1 of 2 of our special Cube overview episodes. I am Justin Parnell. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter. And of course, my co-host,
Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. Co-host with no modifier this week. I usually get an illustrious or something of that nature out of you.
I was actually, you know what? I thought about it and I was like, I wonder if he'll say something if I just throw it to him without saying anything.
Well, now
sure
you know.
Sure enough, yeah. I won't make that mistake again. I don't want to. Yeah, I think it was episode 33 for 32 weeks prior. I'd built you up, and then I just got to throw one in, just white bread style.
Yeah, you can't
see what happens.
Spoil me like that for over a half a year and then expect me not to notice when that dries up.
Well, I knew you would notice. It was whether you were going to say something out loud or not.
Fair enough.
So, Ryan, ultimately our episode today is we're going to be doing an overview on Pauper Cubes. This is actually something that people have asked about since, I really think since the start of us doing the 540.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty regular comment. Yeah, on like the very early episodes.
For sure. But we have some things to cover before we get to the beef of our show today.
Yeah, some stuff going on, some stuff with us, some stuff in the world of Cube.
That's right. Which one do you want to go first? You want to do our stuff or the not our stuff?
Well, let's just quick make mention of the not our stuff. If you haven't heard, the website Cube Tutor will be going down at the end of the month. It's either the 31st of October or the 1st of November, but it'll be officially gone. If you want to save anything that you have on Cube Tutor, you have that much time to try to save that sort of thing. And quick shout out to Ben at Cube Tutor. I cannot really overstate how important this platform was for the ease of access of managing my own Cube stuff. When I was first getting into Cube, when I was digging deeper into Cube, this as a tool to organize my thoughts and really help drive my excitement about the world of Cube, even just looking at other people's cubes, the way that Cube Tutor facilitated, just really groundbreaking at the time. You know, it was that website was around for 10 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. Very, very big for me when I started getting into Cube. And if you want to save specifically just an old Cube Tutor file, it's actually a really easy feature to use on Cube Cobra, where they just have an import cube and you just use the cube ID from Cube Tutor. So go ahead, save all your old Cube products. Again, shout out to Ben at Cube Tutor. Really appreciate what you did for the community.
Well, that is tough to follow up, but I'm going to do my best. Cube Tutor is a tool and a portion of the Cube community that I think is going to be easy for people that have not, that haven't, I guess, been involved in the Cube community for as long to look at and not appreciate. And I think that's a common thing with people that do the first thing, because it was quite an ambitious project that Ben initially did as the owner of Cube Tutor. I'm going to say probably around a decade ago. That was the first website for me and listeners of this show and people that know me from elsewhere. This was the first time that I had my cube in not an Excel document. This was on Cube Tutor. And that's a big thing on itself. One. But it sounds crazy now, but I was not alone, because that's where everyone's cube was. Because there was not a place where you could cultivate a group of people that had lists for cubes collectively in a single location. That was something it just didn't exist. And it's not that Cube was new, it had existed for a while, but there was no place to do that. And Cube Tutor was the first place that you could have that experience for both to house your cube or cubes, as well as to see everyone else's and to start cultivating ideas. And that's really a thing that I think might get lost through time. Is Cube Tutor was a website that really helped in the cultivation of cube building. Because when you have an easy way to organize things, where if people don't want to work with, Google Docs or Excel or however you have your cube, or if you didn't have it, anywhere easy access for other people, it became daunting. And a lot of people just didn't do it, which is fine. It's ultimately the cube is a physical thing for most people, and you're going to have the physical copy, and that's the most important thing. But this made it easy for people to have their cube in a place where they had to do very little work. You just select the cards, right?
Yeah, and also just like for shareability too, even if there was that database of Excel spreadsheets, we're a little spoiled these days. Right now you can go to Cube Tutor, Cube Cobra, maybe Moxfield, maybe some other sites. When it started, Cube Tutor was the only place you could go for an organized by mana value list of cards with mouse over images for the cards. And that is just so significant for actually understanding what you're looking at. Even for me, like, I'm top 1% of invested players, and it's just so important to just be able to quickly reference like that. And like you were saying, it's really easy to take for granted if you weren't getting into this before that existed.
I know that Gwen Decker was the owner of Cube Cobra, which is, I think at this point, partially because, new and shiny, made some improvements to Cube Tutor, but also because Cube Tutor was going through some hosting and other issues at the time. but took a lot of inspiration from Cube Tutor existing. So if that didn't exist, you're not going to have a website like Cube Cobra and future websites as they come up if you didn't have this type of project happen first. Mm-hmm. And I just don't want people to forget that.
For sure.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And even though it's not going to exist anymore, the impact that it's made on, again, the kind of proliferation of people creating cubes. It sounds so crazy that something, just a website that says, here, put your cube here. But the amount of people that had cubes and started creating cubes, to me, it seemed like that was really one of the first like explosions of people doing that is when that website existed. So that's a huge thing. I mean, I don't know how many other people can say that individual people have had that kind of impact on just the community as a whole. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, massive. Impossible to quantify, really.
Yeah. So, well, we'll dedicate this episode to Cube Tutor. Thank you for all of the times that you made me want to put something into a website that was not Microsoft Excel.
Thank you for giving me a tool to use that wasn't Microsoft Excel, because I have no patience for it.
It doesn't have patience for you, Ryan, okay? It does exactly what you tell it to do. Anyway,
that's the problem. That's the problem I have. I don't like being in charge.
Yeah, and Cube Tutor's like, you know what? I got you. I know what you want me to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we appreciate you, Cube Tutor. Excellent tool. We're not going to be the only podcast, I'm sure, that is going to make mention of this, but we would be remiss if we didn't. I looked as we were that news had kind of come out right before we recorded last week, so I'd actually not even seen it yet. I think Ryan had maybe seen it right before, but it was not really fully on our radar last week, so we want to make sure we got it this week. Mm-hmm. All right, that's thing number one. Thing number two. We are going to be doing our first mailbag. I wrote article. We do not do articles. Our first mailbag podcast that we are going to be recording at the beginning of November. So what we want all of you in listener land to do is to get at us on social media by October 31st with cube questions that you would like us to answer. It doesn't have to be wholly about Cube, but it should be related to Cube.
It is much less likely that your question will be answered on the podcast if it is not significantly about Cube. There's going to be a correlation there.
Yeah, you can ask whatever you want, but just know that if you want to have your question read on that episode, think about it. Just put a little extra thought. Hey, is this about Cube? Or did I just put the word cube in my tweet and hope that they would answer this question?
I mean, you can ask me whatever question. I might mute or block you. Muting and blocking people on Twitter is something of a hobby of mine. But if you do have a good question about Cube, I would love to hear it. And hopefully I have a good answer for you.
Yeah. Or at least or an answer. Maybe one of us have a good answer and one of us will have a bad answer.
Yeah. Be sure to at both of us.
Yeah.
That way you have the highest chance of one of us wanting to answer your question and having a good answer for it.
Yeah, double your chances. So this is, Twitter. We already set our handles at the top of the show. We'll say them at the end as well. YouTube comments. I don't know. You could email me at the account that I have posted on my Twitter, but then you're already going to Twitter. So why just tweet at me anyway? I don't know, other places. Wherever you find me on social media, as long as you at me, I'll see it.
Yeah, don't contact me anywhere other than Twitter. I'm gonna go on the record with that.
So yeah, but you had some options. Look, YouTube. I can leave a YouTube comment.
Yeah,
We
but that's
see
not
those. We see those.
That's not contacting me, is all I'm saying.
Okay,
that's
like
a
in the
good place to
public
put your
forum.
questions. Yeah, that was a more general note.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, for the purpose of your questions, YouTube is a totally reasonable place to do that.
Don't go to Ryan's house and leave a note stuck to his door.
Yeah, don't do that. Definitely don't do that.
Anyway, mailbag article coming at the beginning of next month. That's going to be episode 36. Okay, this is episode 33. We're going to remind you next week and the week after that, but then after that, you won't have any more time because we're going to record the episode. Okay, So I just want y'all to know, because there's going to be someone, I guarantee it, there will be someone that sends us a question on November 1st, and they're like, you didn't read my question. I mean, yeah, I'm telling you the rules now. October 31st, that's when this ends.
You know what I'm really excited for, actually?
What's that?
Reading the YouTube comments for the actual mailbag episode and having it be just a number of questions.
Yeah, really excited. Really looking forward to that. It's basically inevitable, but you know, I guess if we know it's coming, it will be. It's going to feel about the same.
Yeah, we'll just save those for someday. It's fine.
Yeah, we might sprinkle them in, you know? Who knows? Anyway, October 31st. And the only reason I'm saying this multiple times is because some of you are going to think that it's not October 31st. You're going to think it's a different day. It's not. That's the last day, October 31st.
Repetition is really important when it comes to teaching, I believe. Some people find it condescending, but then they get mad at you, or rather you are forced to get mad at them when they don't remember. So October 31st is the deadline.
Thank you. That is correct. Okay, so that is our stuff. We have a whole podcast to do, though. And
yeah, that's true.
We did let people know that we're going to be talking about Pauper Cubes. So we're going to do that right after we do this ad break, which, of course, you expected to get some Pauper Cube discussion before the first ad break. No chance. You got to listen to an ad that's one or both of our voices, and then come back and listen to both of our voices again. Lucky you. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dig in to what is a Pauper Cube. Look, we're all Magic players here, so I know you're probably like me, and you have some extra cards that are hanging around that you would love to sell for cash, or maybe trade in for some more cards. Well, if you're looking to sell or trade your Magic the Gathering cards, it has literally never been easier. Visit StarCityGames.com/sell with a 30% store credit trade-in bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry. There is no reason to sell to anybody else. We have 4 convenient ways to sell your cards to us. 1, check out our buy list. You can find out exactly what we're paying for each of your cards individually right now. That too much work? Number 2, check out our ship and sell program. Put your cards in a box, tape it up, send it to us. We'll do the rest of the work. Or if you're passing through Roanoke, Virginia, come visit Star City Comics and Games, and we can sit down with a buyer and work out a trade right there in the store. Or if you might be a store and you're looking to offload bulk and you have over 500,000 cards you're looking to sell, we can come to you. Any of the ways that you want to work with us, go to StarCityGames.com/sell. That's SELL right now for more information. All right, Ryan, the start of the overview for today's episode, I think, as I said in the last segment, what is a Pauper Cube? What is it? What defines the pauperness of a Pauper Cube?
So pauper refers to a format legality where only cards printed at common are allowed. Typically, that means that common is the lowest rarity the card has been printed at. Some people might have more particular rules. Maybe you don't allow a card if it's at a higher rarity. And then there's some weird stuff that happens. Actually, the really weird set when it comes to Pauper and then common and uncommon cubes that are called peasant cubes is the Magic Online Vintage Masters, which was never printed in paper. And there's some weird stuff going on there. But the broad definition is a cube featuring only cards that have been printed at common.
And this is pretty ubiquitous wherever, like Ryan said. It's slightly different in the digital offerings because there are cards that are printed there either entirely or printed at a rarity they don't appear in paper. This is a big thing. This is a very big thing in the Pauper community, not just for Cube, but for the Pauper format.
It is a two-way street as well, because some of the very old Magic sets were never officially released on Magic Online. They were peppered in through Masters sets or later reprinted, and then that set was put on Magic Online. There was kind of a merge that happened as it pertained to Pauper constructed on Magic Online within, I believe, the last year, maybe a little bit more than that, where they picked up and said, okay, Hymn to Turok is a common, High Tide is a common, Sinkhole is a common, except these cards are all banned in Pauper now.
So what was the point of that?
That's a great question, Justin.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. Okay, so why would a person build a Pauper Cube where you only use commons?
Yeah, so very, very often, this is going to be a combination of being interested in Cube and possibly also a budget consideration. My first cube was a Pauper Cube, as I have said on the podcast. And some of that was, if I was going to pay for a cube, this is the one I could afford. But I also just had a really fun experience playing Pauper Cube before I ever built one. I think it's really important if you want to sell a game experiences. You can mention the price point, but it's not worth playing just because it's cheap. You know, you can try these out, and we'll point you in the direction of a Pauper Cube that you can look at that has been played heavily, and that I actually played. We'll get to that in a little bit here. But I had a friend who built a Pauper Cube that was basically just a bunch of foil commons that he had just had from years of opening a case or two of every set.
Love it.
And I just had a super good time. And it's both something that I was playing Pauper constructed on Magic Online, so I could build a cube that was evocative of that constructed format, which I found really appealing. And something that I found from drafting Pauper over the course of several years is that a Pauper Cube really feels very similar to traditional booster draft, except you just pay the cost up front. You don't have to keep buying packs. But just playing it a lot, you do really hone the technical skills that go into traditional booster draft. You won't learn the metagame or the pick order for a given set, obviously, but just that combat-oriented, really creature-heavy, card advantage, the kind of tempo plays, the making good attacks, navigating all that stuff that comes up in basically every booster draft environment is really reinforced with the play patterns of Pauper Cube in my experience.
Yeah, I think that is of any, just about any cube you can draft, it replicates traditional limited the best. And that is both in the fact that it's obviously all commons. So the cards that you are seeing in traditional booster packs are common more frequently than any other rarity by a significant margin. But also because the things that each of the colors do at common are a lot narrower. You see specialty things that colors are able to do at higher rarities, and those are in cubes that don't have a rarity restriction. So when you distill it to, all of the commons, it is going to be themes that are kind of consistent over Magic's lifetime at each of those colors or multicolored sections. And again, that's replicated in just play experiences that limited formats have had that are trying to do those things. And of course, like any cube, you're plucking the best ones, and oftentimes it's the most efficient. But every once in a while, it's what's the word I'm looking for?
Most unique?
Yeah, Yeah, most unique for what you have available, which is more rare in a Pauper Cube than it is in a cube that doesn't have a rarity restriction, or even a cube that has a slightly looser rarity restriction.
Yeah, there's kind of an amusing tangent along that's a little bit counter to what you just said. It kind of is the exception that proves the rule, but a number of commons from Time Spiral Block end up being very compelling Pauper Cube inclusions because they give you something at a rate in a color that you wouldn't normally get.
Definitely.
There's some more egregious examples, but a card that really comes to mind for me is Shaper Parasite. Just like a 3 mana, it's a morph, so you're always going to play it as a 3 mana 2/2, and it morphs up for, I believe, 2 and a blue, and it gives a creature +2/-2. So it's just this quirky blue, almost flame tongue Kavu, which you do not see too much of that.
Yeah, no, I think that you're absolutely right. It is cards that are basically the best at what they do for each of those colors, but then the unique cards stand out more frequently here than they do elsewhere.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And I actually think that is a draw, because whenever a color gets a card like that in Pauper, it's a really big deal. That's a huge deal. Because that's, those ubiquitous effects at different costs and values in every set. Those are kind of, you're just like, oh, well, I can have a lot to choose from, and they kind of all do similar things. But the unique effects, those are really the fun ones to get. And I think that as an owner of a Pauper Cube, that is a really, really fun experience to try to kind of mold your environment around how the unique cards interact with the more ubiquitous ones.
And there's been kind of a proliferation. I guess some of this is just cards that are good on rate, less so much that uniqueness factor. But in recent years, with so many master sets, with Modern Horizons, with even stuff like Battle Bond, just a number of sets where cards get downshifted to common. There's a lot more powerful options. Pauper Cube today can look so different than what it looked like 5 years ago.
Yeah. Magic has gotten more powerful, and that's at every rarity.
Yeah, there's a few cards that these aren't even the most powerful cards. It tends to be more uncommons that were downshifted to common, but we also have a few rares that have been downshifted to common for some of these sets.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So, Brian, have you built a Pauper Cube before?
Yeah, it was actually my first cube, and the first file that I ever saved on Cube Tutor was a Pauper Cube. Yeah, I'm getting all nostalgic.
Yeah. What was the first Pauper Cube that you played with the one that you had built for yourself?
No, it was a friend. I played with a friends before I built one for myself, and then his was some weird number, like 540 cards or 450 cards. Yeah, I whittled it down to 360 cards for a tighter experience. And it was not so much cards I own. It was cards that I sought out to cultivate a specific sort of play pattern, play experience. And it was largely modeled after Pauper Constructed at the time, which also looked a lot different than Pauper Constructed today. And some of that is a number of new cards. Modern Horizons 2 has shaken up the format and already resulted in a ban. And like 6 or 7 commons that I really liked playing in Pauper Constructed have been banned between then and now. Might actually be a higher number than that.
I was going to say, I was like, I'd be surprised if it was that low, but I mean, I admittedly do not keep up with Pauper as a format. I do not play Magic Online, so it is primarily a Magic Online format, and that's somewhat lost on me.
When I first started playing Pauper Constructed, I want to say the ban list was exactly cranial plating.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then there was a really big ban when they banned Grape Shot, Invigorate, and Empty the Warrens all on one update.
Now, I do remember that because it got 2 storm cards.
Yes. And there was a huge delta between the consistency / power level of the two Storm decks, because there was a Grape Shot deck and an Empty of the Warrens deck. They were not the same deck. And okay. I was playing the Empty of the Warrens deck a lot at the time, so I'm still salty about it. But it was not very healthy play patterns. Something that I liked about the deck was, at the time, Pauper Constructed really felt like Legacy Light. Like when people talk about Modern being Legacy Like, that was less true than Pauper Constructed when I started playing Pauper, because you could play Infect that could kill you on turn 2. You can play the Empty of the Warrens combo deck that was gunning for a turn 2 or a turn 3 kill. The Grape Shot combo deck was like, I think it could turn 3, but it was incredibly consistent. I think it could turn 2 actually, but it was incredibly consistent turn 3 or turn 4. And then the deck that really held the format together was Delver. So there's like the overlap with Legacy was actually pretty heavy at the time.
That's pretty awesome. I haven't like I said, I'm not a Pauper aficionado, and that is, I mean, you're definitely right. Compared to any Modern at any point in time, that sounds a lot more similar to Legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they
don't have the
that.
mana, but otherwise, yeah. So I've played in one Pauper event, and this was actually a paper Pauper event. So at the Star City, at the time called the Star City Game Center, which is the retail store attached to our warehouse where I work, Star City Games. After Eternal Masters was released, well, leading up to Eternal Masters, they were planning to have a Pauper tournament, of course, because like all of the Master sets like have a pretty significant impact on the format, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably know that there was a very important card that was downshifted to common at Eternal Masters.
Well, Knight's Whisper still sees a lot of play. Is this what we're talking about?
It is Peregrine Drake.
Oh, yeah. That one does not see play anymore.
Yes, it did for a very brief
I forgot what set it was from, but yeah.
Yeah. So I played this blue-red Peregrine Drake combo deck and easily won the event, beating 2 other people playing that same deck in the top 8. It's the only time I've ever played Pauper. It felt a lot closer to Vintage, even though, from a inevitability of what I'm trying to execute my game plan standpoint. Yes, that was quite interesting. I never played it again. I think Peregrine Drake was banned within 3 months.
It didn't last super long, and actually, after the Grape Shot empty ban, it didn't take very long for Temporal Fissure Storm to be the best deck in the format. Yeah. And Cloud of Fairies and Bounce Lands, just the spells with the untap lands when this enters the battlefield or when this resolves text. Frantic Search, that one is not legal in Pauper. Maybe that one was always banned. Maybe it was Frantic Search and Cranial Plating when I started playing. That actually sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So the first Pauper Cube that I played, I'm fortunate because the first one that I played was actually Adam Staborski's Pauper Cube. He used to live on the East Coast. He works for Wizards now, lives in Washington, but he lived on the East Coast. So we traveled to a lot of the same events, Grand Prix and Open Series, SCG Open Series events and stuff like that. And a lot of times, myself and a lot of people in the Mid-Atlantic area would just cube at those events. So his was the first cube, the first Pauper Cube that I got to play with, which is, I think he likes to state that his was the first. I don't think anyone can prove it wrong.
Yeah, and he's written a lot about his Pauper Cube too. You can find a ton of content from him. Yeah.
So I got a chance to cube with Stibs a lot, which was really great. This is a decade ago, but so that was my kind of first experience. And I did not build a Pauper Cube personally until about 2 years ago for right now. So Ryan had alluded earlier to, if you did not want to build your own Pauper Cube, that there was a place that could help you with that. And this is our plug. This is not an ad. It is, because I'm going to advertise to you right now, but this is coming from my heart, not from the little section on our organizational website that tells me what ads to read every week. This is the Star City Games Players Cube. And this is a cube that I actually put together that you can buy. You can go into Star City Games right now and buy for $100, $99.99. One, the value is absolutely insane. You should buy one. But two, this is a 360 card Pauper Cube that comes with a bunch of sleeves also to sleeve the entire cube. You have to sleeve it yourself. Okay, I don't want to lie to you, but we do give you the sleeves to do it. So this is a cube I put together for the 10K Cube Draft at SCG Con 2019. And the top 8 of that 10K Cube Draft was the SCG Con Cube, which was a 360 card powered cube. This is a 360 card paupered cube that you could play in, keep the cards that you played in events to try to qualify for that event. This was an absolute nightmare to put together. So what I did after a lot of back and forth, this is the brainchild of myself and marketing department assistant manager Jenna Julius, who is not listening to this podcast. Not many people are going to know who that is, but give her a shout out. That we conceived of this, really this entire idea. Because the year prior, in 2018, we did the 10K Cube Draft, but you had to qualify via playing Constructed. Standard, Modern, that might have been it that year. And I talked to 50, 60 people that played in the qualification events. I talked to everyone extensively that made the top 8. Number one feedback I got was, I want to just come to an event and cube all weekend to qualify for a 10K cube and then cube some more. I don't want to bring any cards. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. If I was a player, I didn't, obviously play any of these events, but if I was a player, that's what I would want. So I was like, okay. So in January, following that event, which was in December, Jenna and I sat down and we're like, okay, how can we figure this out? And she is the marketing person, so like really planning the, kind of the angles of everything, of like how logistically this would like make sense for the event that they were trying to put together. So ultimately, what we landed on was I was going to put together a 360 card cube, but I was only going to choose and lock in a certain number of the cards, and then another certain number of the cards would be voted on via Twitter and Facebook polls, I think Facebook, by the community at large. So after going back and forth on the number, I decided on 250 cards that I'd pick, and then 330 cards that would be voted on to finally narrow it down to 110. And this was split mostly among monocolored cards and then a few multicolored cards and a couple of artifacts. And it was incredibly difficult because, to me, my job was to ultimately create a cube list that was cohesive and played well. Because this is something that people are going to use to play in an event, to qualify for an event that pays out a lot of money. And I had to kind of do it in a way that saved the community from themselves as much as I possibly could. Because it's difficult when I ultimately had control over every single card that was put in. But what I did was I made buckets of 3 cards each. So they were similarly functional cards. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Because fortunately, Magic, because of the kind of theme ubiquity and colors, have a lot of cards that are doing a similar thing. You could argue some are better, some are worse, but they're all playable in a Pauper Cube environment. So I put together these 110 buckets and then just let everybody vote. Now, once it got to the voting part, my work part was over, but the stress was not watching people vote on these cards because a lot of times they weren't what I would pick. Yeah. I knew going in every single time what I would have chosen.
I was watching this and I didn't get too involved except on one pull. One set me off. So a lot of these, your buckets, it was really just 3 different versions of passivism, being like, which one of these passivisms do you like? Ha ha ha! You can't pick wrong, and that's the punchline there. But there was an is it slot. I don't remember the 3rd card, but I remember when I
pull up the bucket. You keep going.
I remember when I saw the poll, Goblin Electromancer was winning, presumably because people had heard of the card. 2 mana, 2/2. Your instants and sorceries cost 1 less. Basically unplayable in a Pauper Cube. Difficult to cast. Body sucks. Ability doesn't generate actual value. Just a mana boost.
I got the bucket up right here, by the way.
Okay, well, I remember I quote tweeted it because I had to rally the troops because Electromancer was winning over the card that eventually made it in, which is Razorfin Hunter. Blue-red, 1/1. Tap, deal 1 damage to any target, Merfolk Goblin. That card fucking rules. Like, the idea of voting for Goblin Electromancer for inclusion over Razorfin Hunter made me so mad. That it was even a choice was infuriating.
Well, I mean, Goblin Electromancer is essentially Razorfin Hunter if it didn't have its ability.
It's twice as large.
So it was Frostburn Weird was the 3rd card.
Okay.
Versus Goblin Electromancer versus Razorfin Hunter. Goblin Electromancer, easily the worst card. Easily, not by like a seismic margin.
Yeah.
Frostburn Weird is significantly better than Goblin Electromancer, but it's still not as good as Razorfin Hunter, which is a 2-mana pinger. Yeah. Regardless if it's in 2 colors. That's
Frostburn Weird might actually like make more decks just because the mana's a little bit tough. I have some sympathy for Frostburn Weird, but like, not only is Razorfin Hunter just like clearly the best of the 3, but the fact that Electromancer was just winning. I shared in your frustration that day.
Yeah. So one of the first buckets we did, and this was the one where that really, and I was like, because this was Jen and I were deciding of like the order of these. And I know we wanted to do this on a broadcast. It was like an SCG Philly broadcast, I think is when we started it. And I was like, well, there's one that I put in here that is a popular card that is the worst card by a million times. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't. It's not coming to me.
Okay. So one of the very first ones was a bucket of 1 mana flyers, putting air quotes around that. And it was the cards Wingcrafter versus Fairy Seer versus Delver of Secrets. And let me tell you, I love a Delver of Secrets in my heart. However, it was not going to be good in this cube, no matter how the community voted. But of course, Delver of Secrets wins one of the very first votes in a landslide, and I'm like,
a sign of things to come.
Exactly, and it was. But this was an interesting experience because I basically built like 3 different Pauper Cubes, but not collectively. But I still had to go through and try to identify all of these things, and I even have in my little spreadsheet here that's like 1 mana flyer, 2 mana flyer, blue tapper, 3 mana card advantage creature, difficult to interact with blue creature, card draw saboteur, regrow instant / sorcery card, regrow instant / sorcery card, spell loving creature, large ability flyer. And it's basically, I had to put all of these things together of like playable cards. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult. This is honestly the most difficult cube project I've ever done, and it's not even close. This took me months to do. Right.
There's a ton that goes into that, because you have to give some meaningful choices, or at least the semblance of a meaningful choice, and it has to be playable one way or the other, because people are going to be playing it, and they'll be rendering their feedback whether you ask for it or not, and it probably on some, like, we should take some interest in that.
Yeah,
but that's a huge undertaking. It's really cool that you have those buckets saved so you can relive that frustration.
Yeah, I pulled. I mean, well, of course, it's obviously just it's on a spreadsheet. Yeah, I got them all at my fingertips. That's the magic of spreadsheets. Yeah, I have the dates for everything. I got it all. I got it all, Ryan. Anyway, you should buy a Players Cube for $99.99 on starcitygames.com/star-city-games-players-cubes. Just kidding. We'll add the link in the notes. Yeah, you should go buy one. It's a pretty good time. I've played it a few times now. I thought that it was just going to be a mess, but I was going to be its harshest critic no matter what. And it's actually still pretty solid. I felt like I had to give myself a pat on the back for at least competently putting together the part that I had control over.
Yeah, I did end up playing a couple of those qualifiers, and despite not winning at all, I did still think that the cube is pretty solid. It was also kind of fun for me because I had stopped updating my Pauper Cube a little while before this had happened. So drafting a Pauper Cube with Modern Horizons commons and just appreciating how different the environment was very cool, even if I was getting destroyed by some of them.
Yeah, there's some cards that, at the end of the day, I would have not included. There's a couple. Not many. There's a couple. Anyway, I think everyone has heard me talk long enough about my specific Pauper Cube endeavor. So I think it's time we take another break, unless you have any more notes on this section here.
Nah, that sounds good. Now we can really get into the particulars. So,
yes. So, even though we just spent some amount of time advertising to you, we're going to do it again. So we're going to take one more break. Not the last break, but we're going to take one more right now. And we're going to come back and let you know what to do if you are building your very first Pauper Cube.
What's up, gamers? Taking a break from the pod to talk to you about Star City Games Premium and why, if you're not already a member, you really should become one. First of all, the price is great. Only $7.99 a month. That's less than the price of one collector booster. And for that, you get all the following. You get a 5% discount on all Magic the Gathering sealed product, including the aforementioned collector booster, a 10% discount on all Magic the Gathering singles, if that's more your speed, and as well as a 15% discount on all supplies. It's going to be your deck boxes, your binders, your sleeves. Lord knows I always need more sleeves for cubes and all the Magic cards I have lying around. And you also get free entry into some SCG Tour online events. Definitely check those out. And finally, last but certainly not least, you get exclusive access to Star City Games website content from a stable of some of the game's greatest and most entertaining minds. You know who we are. You know where to find us. Sign up for SCG Premium today at starcitygames.com/join-premium.
All right, Ryan. So we've gassed everybody up a little bit. Now they're chomping at the bit about wanting to build their own Pauper Cube. So tell me all of your secrets.
Yeah, let's get into it. So kind of the first big question, the first crossroads you come to when you're cultivating your Pauper Cube is going to be regarding the upper bound of the power level. Because if you look at every common ever printed, there's some real messed up ones. And I made mention of like Master sets and Modern Horizons. That's not even what I'm talking about. Like there's some really good cards in those sets, but they actually more bring up the average quality. And there's a number of things that they do that actually saves the Pauper Cube environment from some of the messed up cards. Like the quality of just like playable 3 toughness creatures and even some 2 toughness creatures helps push back against how messed up cards like Razorfin Hunter can be. So some of the beefier creatures with relevant text have really improved the play experience, at least in my opinion. But I'm talking about cards like Capsize. We had a little bit to say about that card last week, but blue 1 instant. Return target permanent to its owner's hand, buy back 3. It wouldn't happen every game. And the higher power level of the format makes it happen less often. But some games, if this card is in the cube, will just be every turn, one player, return your land to your hand, return Capsize to my hand. Buckle up, because we were going to be doing this until I can do it twice a turn. That's the only thing that's going to change.
Yeah. And if you happen to play a threat, then you will continue to play that threat for the rest of the game as well.
Yep. Yeah, you're going to have to try to get two things going in the face of your land being returned to your hand every turn. There's a number of cards like that. Pestilence, just a 4-mana enchantment that you can pay 1 black mana to deal 1 damage to every creature. Hits players too, but it would typically be combined with some way to gain life or otherwise deal damage to your opponent. Rolling Thunder, red X, deal X damage divided any way you choose. You might know the card better as Plague Wind. Pretty common. It just destroys all your opponent's creatures. And
now you did mention, just want to jump in on Pestilence. Now, while that does hit players at their life total, it definitely damages them more emotionally, which is often going to lead to the end of the game prior to their life total being reduced to 0.
That is true. That can happen with some of these cards.
Okay, anyway, continue.
A favorite of mine, Treasure Cruise, now banned in Pauper Constructive. It's certainly a good ban, but you got to be mindful that card, the games just go long enough in Pauper Cube. That's going to be a 1-mana draw 3. That's tough to compete with. I would still put it in my Pauper Cube if I still maintained one, but again, these are the considerations you're making. Sprout Swarm is kind of, I think, the first card a lot of players are going to think of as really messed up historic commons. Green and 1 instant, make a 1/1 sapling. And then it has Convoke, so you can tap creatures to pay the mana cost and buy back 3. And you can Convoke to pay all of those costs. So if you have 5 creatures, that's a free Sprout Swarm. And so you can see how that can get out of hand. If you never played Time Spiral Limited, it was really the scourge of it. Actually, when they did Time Spiral Remaster this year, they did not reprint Sprout Swarm. They had considered it for the set because, again, it is such a big part of that limited environment. They talked about putting it at Mythic Rare. And they decided it would be better for the booster draft environment just to not put it in the set.
Yeah. It would feel worse at Mythic Rare because then when someone has it, it's like, oh, well, of course you have your Mythic Rare Sprout Swarm. I can't beat it.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a number of other cards like that. So you just got to think, what do I actually want the upper bound of the power level to be? Because these cards are also just evocative of a number of limited formats for years past, just to be mindful that you're not putting your players into positions to play a lot of unfun games. And kind of the big thing about this is that these are largely consolidated in blue, black, red. There's just not really anything egregious in white. Battle Screech is a common now. That's a really good white card, but
yeah, it's just a really good card.
It's just not on the level of this other stuff. And Sprout Swarm is just so splashable. That's really not bringing green up. So be mindful of that sort of thing. One thing that I tried briefly and hated, but I think it's a good mechanic to talk about because I think you want to do some of this mechanic just so your format's not all creatures and Doomblades. But Hex Proof is really interesting to think about in the context of Pauper Cube. Because if you really want green and white to beat up on all removal spells and counter spells, you can give them Slippery Bogle and you can give them a bunch of cheap auras to attack on those creatures. And they'll win a lot of games, but those draft decks really just look more like scripted sealed decks, like you're trying to draft this exact card out of every pack. So that's not very fun or engaging. And the games are dog shit. But I do think that when you get into 3 and 4 mana stuff, Jungleborn Pioneers, a 3-mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1 with Hex Proof. I think that's a really good execution of this sort of thing. Primal Hunt Beast, a 4-mana 3/3 with Hex Proof. I actually like having those around. And those are cool because they're good against Doomblade Tribal, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call a control deck like that. And you can also just sideboard them in the control mirror, which I think is pretty cool too.
That is, I really just don't like Hex Proof, so that's not. I don't think that's something that I would have ever considered.
Yeah,
like it's just. But you're not wrong though. I actually think you have a pretty good point, because a lot of times, and this is just historically in Magic, removal spells appear at lower rarities for their, I guess, their value more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to find good removal spells at common.
Yeah, and
where you don't find good things of a lot of other things at common. The
reasons I like the beefier ones are threefold. One, counter spells come online before the 3+ mana threats. You got a lot of really good counter spells at common. Counterspell proper, of course, mana leak, miscalculation, a number of other options. Aggressive decks have some time to get online, so it's not just like 1/2 mana hexproof threat into Armadillo Cloak, gain all this life, you can't win anymore. You got some time to get some beatdowns before they're online. And 3, I'm sure we're going to get into this, but some of the best cards, the most fun cards for Pauper Cube, are just spells with flashback. Yep. You know, if you like doing it once, you'll probably like doing it twice. These are just, again, some of the best historical limited cards. Everybody loves flashback. That's why they do flashback as often as they do. And there's a number of removal spells with flashback. So giving creatures a fighting chance, I have found a little bit of hexproof is a nice knob to turn.
Just a touch of hexproof.
It's just a dash.
Just a dash. Just a dribble of hexproof.
Hexproof to taste.
Yeah, just hexproof. Exactly. Okay, so, something that this is kind of going off your point, Ryan, with hexproof, because like I said, I had not really considered that as a thing. It's not that I wasn't aware of hexproof, but I guess I'm because of the rest of Magic, I like to be the Doomblade not the Doomblade E. So I like my things to be able to be Doombladeable, which is why one of my least favorite creatures of all time is Chameleon Colossus, but that's a story for another time. There's a lot of ways, especially like over the last 10 years, as Magic has evolved, not just from a design perspective, but like we said earlier, from a rarity adjustment perspective, because that's been an absolute massive deal to Pauper, both from a cube perspective and from a constructed format perspective. There's so many different ways to build Pauper cubes now compared to a decade ago, which was you just need to play all of the best cards that you have. Mm-hmm. Because this is what you're able to do if you're playing a 360 card cube or larger. You need to get as many good cards as you have, because the difference between the very good commons and your worst cards in your cube is a pretty vast delta. And now you have significantly more options, to the point where you can actually build Pauper cubes in different ways. And I have played, just off the top of my head, traditional Pauper cubes, which is essentially all of the best cards, which you could possibly have. Pauper cubes that try to emulate specific limited formats, kind of on like a 2-color perspective, which is actually my personal favorite way to design cubes. But that is kind of just one of those. And then because of the significant increase in common multicolored lands, like a more multicolored centric Pauper cube, which oftentimes, because of the lands I'll come into play tap, that's quite slow. But slow is, it's all dependent on the rest of the environment. Because if everyone is doing slow, then you're not slow comparatively to your opponent. Mm-hmm. And I think that those, like I said, those are just the ones that I have played in the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years. Although I have not obviously cubed a ton in the last 2 years. So I think this is going to be the case for this week and next week as we get to that. But even with the lower rarity cubes, and we've talked about 3 or 4 sets through this calendar year that we've been doing this podcast for, what is, things that go into most Pauper cubes are going to fit into the custom scenario, but we talk about a lot of cards. And there have been a number of cards just from recent sets that kind of can really make some strong headway into Pauper cubes. And you were talking about a friend's cube who was just made up of opening booster boxes.
Yeah.
And just saying, all right, what do I get? And then oftentimes you're going to take that, each of the things from those sets and build those into your cube, like almost in like an independent fashion. Like, all right, I'm going to get, I just opened a bunch of Amonkhet. Oh, cool. There's a bunch of black-white zombies. Well, I'll build this into my black-white section. And then you kind of do that for everything else. And I just think, I don't know, I think there's a lot of different, you have a lot of different options now where, as opposed to 10 years ago where you didn't, probably more so than just about any other type of way to build a cube.
Yeah, the archetypes are way more robust. Like you can actually have real identities. It's not just what color combination precedes the word value in your deck. Mm-hmm. You can make way more decks that care about specific things. You can have sacrifice themes. There's been a huge upping the stakes in terms of tokens. Spells matter, that we did the deep dive on recently. You get more and more stuff that supports that. Yeah, there's just a lot you can do these days, as opposed to when I first put pen to paper for a Pauper cube, and it was just, what's the best ones? I want the good ones.
Yeah. Now, kind of brings me to my next point. If you're designing a Pauper cube, you're building one, this is not a term that I've used too frequently because most of the time this is a positive thing. But in a Pauper cube, if you overdo this, it can lead to some unfun gameplay. And you gotta watch out for the value monsters. Because a lot of times you get into, as a player, you get into a scenario where every card is a cantrip or a 2-for-1 on both sides of the table. And ultimately what this leads to is a reliance on pure card advantage for the sake of card advantage, and generally leads to slowing down the game and is making the games often decided by whoever played the most card advantage cards. And it doesn't become about magic or playing magic. It's just, did you draw your card advantage cards and did your opponent not draw their card advantage cards? And I think that's a very, very easy thing to get bogged down to in Pauper, because those cards are just inherently more powerful here because it's a lot more difficult to make up ground on cards that do that. So and Mole Drifter is an insane card, just to put that out there. But for even taking a step back for Mole Drifter, just anything that comes into play and like draws a card, for every card that you have that does that your opponent doesn't, even if it costs one less mana, it's almost impossible for them to kind of fight you uphill for that. And it's very easy to see those cards be successful when your cube is drafted and say, well, this deck had a lot and this deck didn't have a lot, so the answer is to add more of those. And that can be a dangerous cycle where people might like that for a time, but the gameplay gets very unengaging very quickly. But it's difficult because of how we're set up as Magic players of, oh, I want to get value out of everything. I want everything to draw a card. I want everything to 2-for-1 my opponent. You have the ability as a designer to make sure that you're crafting your environment. And you got to watch out for the value monsters because they will come in and sneakily wreck your entire environment if you're not careful. Yeah,
the solution can't be just add more, because there's just colors where the volume isn't there. Again, this is where green and white are going to fall progressively more behind, and you will, I can't even really call it inadvertently in good faith, because if you're just ramping up the value, you are just making the creatures that attack and block worse. You just have to be aware of things like that. And you're pushing the game play of your cube into a very homogenized area and a very predictable area as well. The gameplay on those extremes, it tends to be The creature decks just can't keep up because the value decks just 2-for-1 them into the ground. And then the value mirror is literally like whoever misses the first of the first 7 land drops in the game. Like you start playing 18, 19 lands. It's like, well, they're just not going to kill me. And then I just need to do the biggest thing.
Yeah, I just need to hit a land drop and play a 2-for-1 or a cantrip every turn of the game. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I'll play 2 and then I'll really start.
Yep. So it's nice to slow things down and try to make it so the value is maybe you move away from the best draw spells, do ones that are a little bit more inefficient or ones that are more card filtering, less card advantage. It's still good to have some card advantage. I love a compulsive research.
Yeah.
But you do got to watch out for the heavy proliferation of that. And at some level, you do want to compel players to actually play some of the creatures that just attack and block, because just on number of cards printed, somebody has to do that anyway. You want to push everybody a little bit more in that direction.
Yeah. And it's great to add that to the colors that struggle to do that more. Green and white, I think, is a good example. Way more so white than green. Green has a decent number of creatures, especially now, that come into play and draw a card and are decently sized, but still, Ryan's point is well taken, and those are the colors that struggle with that in general the most.
Yeah. And then I also like having just some spells that allow decks that don't want to hit their 8th land drop a little bit of reprieve from flood. I think Retrace is a really great mechanic for Pauper Cube. I mean, not surprising, it's very similar to Flashback, but one of my favorite white cards, I think a very important white card for a decently powerful Pauper Cube, is Sen's Enlistment, which is 3 and a white, make 2 1/1s with Retrace. It doesn't sound like much. And the first time you cast it, it's not much. But what it does over the course of a long game, and there's just not that robust of win conditions, so many of your Pauper games will be longer. You get to mitigate flood, get all these bodies on the battlefield. Maybe you have some kind of sacrifice outlet, some way to pump your team, some way to gain value when creatures die. A lot of ways to take advantage of that. So making sure that the aggressive decks have some ways to mitigate flood without making the game just all value all the time is kind of the sweet spot.
Any other cards you want to mention with Retrace, Ryan?
Flame Jab? Is this time for Flame Jab? That's a good one.
I felt like you backdoored your way into it and you put it on the table and then didn't say it. So if I didn't prompt you to say it, it would be on me.
No, I actually really did. I like Sen's Enlistment a lot. And it's rare for me because it's a white card. I actually took me a second to remember Flame Jab. I do appreciate the reminder, but
sure. Well, I don't want to go too many episodes.
Yeah, right.
Mentioning Flame Jab.
That would be disappointing. I don't want to let the listeners down.
No, definitely not. I absolutely agree. And really, anything that lets you utilize resources at a different point in the game, kicker and multi-kicker are another, great examples of that. We talked about Flashback a little bit, and it's important to remember for Pauper Cubes, the amount of mana you have to spend to Flashback is less relevant here than normal, because the cards you're going to be including in general on the front side are going to be pretty good. So whatever that additional cost is not going to be a factor that's going to negatively affect it in most cases. So, but that's because card advantage is important, and a lot of you can't avoid it. A lot of the best creatures in Magic at common are card advantage related creatures, and it's more about trying to make sure that your cube's not about that rather than excluding them entirely. Identify what the ones are that you want to include, but know that is the case. Know what a card advantage creature looks like. Is that something that draws a card? Does it bounce another creature? Does it kill another creature? Does it return a card from your graveyard to your hand? Does it make you the monarch? Remember that one.
That, yes.
Does it invalidate one of your opponent's cards for some reason? Those are all very much forms of card advantage, and it's just absolutely critical to know what those cards are, how frequently they appear, how many there are in your cube, and I don't want to say build around those, but be crucially evident of their existence.
Mm-hmm. And it's definitely a good note to highlight those, not in the capacity where you want to cut them entirely, because a lot of the excitement is driven by these cards. Yeah. It is very fun to cast Mulldrifter. And Mulldrifter, in the context of playing all commons, and this is actually a way that I find contributes to Pauper feeling like traditional booster draft, Mulldrifter just feels like a beatable rare. You know, your opponent casts it and you're like, oh, that's better than a lot of my cards, but the game's not over. You spent 5 mana, sorcery speed, it's a 2/2. Maybe I can kill it and get some points in, whatever. Maybe I have some way that draws 1 card, so they could maybe draw more lands than me, whatever. Mulldrifter feels like a beatable rare, and it becomes a problem. A beatable rare is no longer beatable if your opponent's deck is 23 otherwise beatable rares. Well, when they're all together, they're a lot less beatable. Yeah. So getting the right spread there is important.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent point. Ryan, did you have any other notes about things people should keep in mind when they're building Pauper Cubes?
Yeah, so this does kind of fall between the lines of a number of things that we had mentioned, but there's a balance between pingers, just kind of 1 damage effect, usually creatures that tap to deal a damage. We talked about Razorfin Hunter earlier, Volshock Sorcerer, I think another one of the hallmark Pauper Cube pingers, red 1/1/1 that taps to deal damage to any target with haste. And balancing those with the creatures that attack and block with no other text, the shitters in your cube.
Yeah, of course.
And making sure that your pingers aren't just Visara the Dreadful all the time, making sure there's creatures that they don't kill, some amount of pushback against those pingers. It's really easy to make your format in a way where killing creatures just so much more desirable than casting creatures. And pingers can really overcome tokens pretty handily, even if you're playing cards like Hordling Outburst that makes 3 tokens, like Battle Screech that makes 4. If you are really incentivizing players playing cards like Volshock Sorcerer alongside removal spells, they can overcome stuff like that. So a good spread of 3 and 4 toughness creatures, or even 2 toughness creatures, can be significant on this front, and giving players some incentives to be attacking and blocking and not just doomblading and Visaraing.
This is another great moment to mention that based on everything we've said in this segment, you should be able to identify that the perfect creature, even for Pauper Cube, still Thraben Inspector.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 2 toughness, draws a card, sign me up.
2 toughness draws a card, but you have to pay a little bit extra to draw that card. It doesn't just give it to you for free. You got to earn it.
Doesn't take the game over. Just good, honest day's work.
Yep. Yeah. I would say that's our last bit of advice. If you're starting to build a Pauper Cube, card number 1, look, it makes sense. You're going to start with white, perhaps. 1 drops, Thraben Inspector. Start your day off right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else after anything you want to add on pingers versus shitters?
Well,
or the like.
We already talked about Flame Jab. I think I got it all in.
Okay, great. All right. In that case, we are going to take one final break, and we'll be back to talk about what you should look for if you're drafting a Pauper Cube in just a moment.
Hello there from Dominario's Judgment, a weekly podcast for Star City Games with me, Dom Harvey.
And me, Ari Lex.
Where we bring you the latest, greatest, and downright weirdest things Modern has to offer.
Want to know what to expect for next weekend's events? We've got you covered.
Do you want deep breakdowns of the hot topics and decks in Modern? We've got you covered.
Just want to make sure you don't miss the latest nonsense before your opponents teach you a lesson about it in the queues? Oh yeah, we have definitely got you covered.
And when Modern Horizons 2 blows the ceiling off this format, as it surely will, we'll be here with you to pick up the pieces.
Find us every week on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you want to head over to StarCityGames.com, we'll be right there alongside all the great content from all your other favorite content producers.
All right, Ryan, let's say I'm a friend of yours that really enjoys appreciating the fruits of your labor while I simply don't build a cube of my own and you build one, and I just want to draft it.
Perfect.
So what are the things that I'm looking for if I'm just drafting a Pauper Cube, but I've not thought about the design process?
So the big thing for a Pauper Cube is your deck. So we've mentioned time and again on this episode how it can feel very similar to traditional booster draft. You're trying to draft a deck that would be good in a traditional retail booster draft environment. Now, this doesn't mean a very specific thing. There's going to be a couple subcategories there, but you're trying to either be a coherent, aggressive deck, curving out 1-2 lighter on 3s and 4s, some tricks, be they pump spells, protection spells, removal spells, but lighter on that, making sure you can get on the table, or a controlling deck where you're trying to kill spell everything and play your value stuff and play the slow game, grab some tap lands to make sure you cast your spells, or you can try to be somewhere in the middle that can punch up against control, punch down against aggro, try to navigate that with your sideboard, but really, generally, you're going to be looking just like almost like more powerful, more interested, or more interesting core set limited. Your decks will be fairly basic. You can do some cool things, but mostly drawing a couple extra cards, getting some big bodies on the table is going to be your end game.
Yeah, what I was going to try to, I was trying to think of an elegant way to say this. So all the stuff that we talked about in the last segment of things to really be careful of as a designer, yeah, take advantage of that if you're a player and you see it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things, creatures that draw cards on their way in or out, whether they're from your library or from a graveyard, those are quite good. They also help kill your opponent. There are certainly some bombs, which we will get to in a little bit. But a really good thing to note is all of the lessons you have learned in regular limited apply here more than any other cube environment. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're drafting ABCs. I think it's also the term bread, which I don't know if people know, but bread in Magic is basically a drafting philosophy, or just limited in general. B stands for bombs, R stands for removal, E stands for evasion, A stands for aggression, and D stands for, we used to call it dicking around, but I think it's also like the dregs of
yeah, dregs was how I was taught it.
Yeah. Yeah, basically we used to call it the dick around cards because it's the ones that you want to avoid, the ones that you're like chasing a thing to try to do. Don't try to chase the bad thing. Like if there's like, oh, if I get this card, this deck will work out. Anyway, but anyway, those are the bad cards. Those are, bombs, removal, evasion, aggression. Those are the hallmarks of limited, regardless of if you're playing a Pauper Cube or, Innistrad Midnight Hunt Limited or Dominaria Limited or anything in between.
Yeah, all that stuff's gonna hold true.
Yeah. You're gonna find that your regular drafting skills will carry you farther than probably anything else, any cutesy cube stuff that you might think of in a Pauper format, more so than any other cube format.
Yeah, just putting yourself in a position to make good attacks is just going to put you so much further ahead in Pauper Cube than almost any other cube environment. And almost by necessity, just playing with all commons, because that's just the play experience that you end up with playing with all commons. There's no planeswalkers. We're not doing that. You can't take extra turns. Even if there are storm cards on the cube, they are like all banned in Pauper Constructed. But even if they're there, you can barely make extra mana. You're not really doing any grandiose turns. And if you are, might be worse off than casting a 5-mana 5/5 anyway.
Yeah. 5-mana 5/5. That's a big time card right there. So I think that I like to specifically look for, and this is somewhat the case in other cubes, but specifically in Pauper cubes. What is the cube about? And there's three main kind of things that I feel like that the cube could be about. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's about exactly one of these things or about any of them, but a lot of times a Pauper cube is about either synergy, which means trying to put together small, combinations of cards that specifically work together. Could be tribal focus. You're trying to build a small tribal theme in your deck, maybe a specific archetype. We talked about spells matters last week. That's something that can be prevalent in Pauper cubes. Is it about speed? How many enter the battlefield tapped lands are there? A lot of times speed and multicoloredness and Pauper cubes are kind of at odds because it's very difficult to have an extremely aggressive deck with a cube that is really focused on a multicolored theme. Mm-hmm. Or is it about value? And value is kind of what we were talking about a lot in the last section of, is every card a 2-for-1? Does every card draw you a card? Once you figure out which of those things seems to be the most important, that's the thing that you should focus on. Because a lot of times, other factors will be present. A cube that's about synergy could have some cards that make it look more aggressive, or cards that are about value. And that doesn't mean those cards are bad, but ultimately the games are going to be won or lost on the synergy of decks. And the same goes for the other three sections. And I think that in this look at a Pauper cube, that identifying what the cube is about, especially from those three angles, is going to help you to win here more than it will in a lot of other cube environments where there could be way more things a cube could be about, or it could be draft dependent, or it's going to be even what specific high-powered cards are included in an environment. Less so here because there's just so many less of those. And like Ryan said, I think was a good point. There's essentially rares, but there's not many rares that the game completely warps around. So it's going to rely on one of those three things in most cases.
Mm-hmm. And for Pauper Cube, it is very often going to be value. And in the same way, or rather the opposite way, that your retail booster draft experience will benefit you here, your higher power cube experience might betray you. Because when it comes to drafting an aggressive deck in a higher power cube, we talk a lot about drafting aggressive decks and just getting that high volume of 1-mana spells. Your deck in Pauper Cube really just can't realistically close that quickly. The games, you maybe will have some turn 4 wins, but those are going to be pretty rare.
They are. And they'll involve red.
Yeah. And like some reach there. Yeah, definitely. A lot of haste creatures. It's just way more likely your opponent's blocking you. Like, the more likely your opponent is to cast Gather the Townsfolk, the more embarrassing Elite Vanguard is. And that's just part of Pauper Cube. Your attackers won't always have a good way to get in. So that's why it was really good that you highlighted Thraben Inspector. Of course, the best white card yet printed, but
of course, as
true as it is anywhere else, probably a little bit more true in Pauper Cube, where being able to generate a little bit of value and blocking can be just as important as attacking here, which is just rarely true in higher powered cubes.
I actually think that it's more important. I think it can be more important to a degree of being detrimental, but that kind of goes back to our previous section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you go overboard with the value, you do more blocking with the good decks than attacking, actually.
Yep. Yeah, because you put the who's the beatdown really comes into play, and as soon as someone realizes, well, if I don't attack, I'm not going to be able to win. And if the other person's like, well, I don't need to attack them to win because I'm just going to run them out of cards, then it will create a kind of inherent aggression from a theoretical perspective, which generally someone will act on and start attacking. And if those attacks aren't good, then that's the blocking player will win a vast majority of the time in those situations.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good note. Another big note for drafting a Pauper Cube, and this pertains kind of largely to how you assess the mana cost of cards you're trying to put in your deck, specifically when it comes to pips. Remember, we at the 540, we hate pips, and
hate them.
In Pauper Cube, part of the problem with pips is that your non-basic lands are going to enter the battlefield tapped. If you want to fix your mana, you're going to take the first turn off with your Guild Gate, your bounce land. And some of these lands are very powerful. I mean, bounce lands are awesome. They feel very much like just drawing an extra card. You just have to take some time to set up there. So your mana is going to be a little bit clunky most of the time, but that's fine as long as you're not doing anything outrageous with the colors of your spells.
Well, that kind of that brings us to another discussion. We talked about, specifically called out some cards. Sprout Swarm being a card that, 2 mana to cast, 1 and a green. And then beyond that, you can buy back for any color of mana and still cast it with 1 and a green. We called out Muldrifter. I'm trying to think other really powerful cards we identified.
Pestilence,
Rolling Thunder, yeah. Because of the fact that across the board, all non-basic lands that produce more than 1 color of mana will come into play tapped. Period. It's not like they'll mostly come into play tapped, they'll always come into play tapped.
Mm-hmm.
That means that splashing is evenly accessible for everyone because you're not worrying about speed. It's no longer a factor to determine if you're going to take Badlands versus Temple of Plenty. I don't know why you'd be making that choice. Those are simply the first 2 lands I thought of. But there's never, let me do a little bit better. You're never going to decide between Hallowed Fountain and Celestial Colonnade.
Oh, I thought you nailed it on the first one, Justin.
Okay, yeah. Badlands and Temple of Plenty. The common drafter's choice.
A dilemma we all must face from time to time.
Yes. I don't know why. I don't know where I got those 2 lands. Anyway.
That is to say, when you see the really good cards, you'll have a decently easy time of splashing them.
Well, not only will you have a decently easy time, you should go out of your way to do so, right? Yes.
Yeah. It can be really tough. You can't splash Pestilence, so that one's not a great example here. But Muldrifter it's going to be really rare when you can convince me that it was correct to pass Muldrifter.
I think that in some cases you could splash Pestilence.
It's not 100% out of the question. It's just really ambitious.
It is ambitious. But you know what? What is ambition if not a vehicle for you to perform your greatest cubing moments of your career?
My favorite Pestilence decks are certainly not mono black.
There you go.
They often are Sultai. So
yeah, I was gonna say you want them big booty green creatures,
or a combo with Calcite Snapper. That's a classic one for me.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. The old 1/4 Hex Proof, not going to touch me.
Shroud.
Excuse me, Shroud.
All right.
Yeah.
That card's reasonable.
Look, only one of us was really endorsing Hex Proof earlier, okay?
Yeah. I'm just saying, if you're anti-Hex Proof, you should know what cards have it. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair. Okay, so I think, but kind of going back to those cards, we've talked about, I kind of think that, Magic has its power 9. Cube at different levels has cube power. And it's not necessarily the cards that that's always like, evident. Like I think in a lot of cubes, this is not a cube this would ever appear in. We're never going to put in a Pauper Cube, but like opposition to me is cube power. It's not regular power. And in fact, it doesn't get played basically in another Magic format, but It can be an incredibly oppressive card. And a card like Pestilence or a card like Sprout Swarm, that's basically power for a Pauper Cube. So if you see those cards, you need to evaluate them as such. These are the most powerful cards. These are the most powerful cards, not just in this cube, but that a Pauper Cube can possibly have access to. And that's a really important way to frame that. Because it's not like, is this good in this cube? Is this good in this cube? It's these cards are good in every cube because these are the best possible things you can be doing, period, across all cubes that are restricted to just common cards.
Right. And for some of them, maybe you think your deck is really well positioned against them, despite them being the most powerful cards in the cube. And you won't be wrong 100% of the time. You're probably wrong more than you think you are. But also just, if you ever just like mulliganed against a deck with a higher power ceiling than yours, like, has this ever happened to you? It's gonna happen again. So you would rather have your looks at those cards that can just kind of win the game on their own.
Yeah, it's better. Do you have any favorite Pauper Cube cards to draft that we haven't brought up before?
Let me peruse the old list. I think that Sen's Enlistment was the big kind of obscure one that I'm really into.
I got one. This isn't super obscure, but it does have the same mana cost as Sen's Enlistment. That is Guardian of the Guild Pact.
Oh, that's a hot one.
Yeah, so Guardian of the Guild Pact is a 2/3 spirit for 3 and a white. And its text is very simple. It just says protection from monocolor. Now there's a lot of monocolored cards in a Pauper Cube. And this is a 2/3 for 4, so it's not inherently impressive. But it is actually pretty difficult to kill this creature meaningfully. Especially when you add on that 3 toughness. And remember earlier when I was saying you really got to watch out for cards that are like value monsters, and I specifically said cards that can invalidate your opponent's cards. Well, this is one, and ironically, the other card that I wanted to mention that I think is a great card as a drafter, that can do that, also has the same casting cost as both Sen's Enlistment and Guardian of the Guild Pact.
Are we going to Palace Sentinels?
No, that's a very good one.
We're going to Coalition Honor Guard?
Coalition Honor Guard.
That's another nice one. These are some really nice white cards, actually.
Yeah, they are. White's really not bad, but it still struggles with these are not like value generating cards, is the thing. They're just good, solid, blue collar cards. Anyway, Coalition Honor Guard. This is a 2/4 human flag bearer for 3 and a white. And it says, while choosing targets as part of casting a spell or activating an ability, your opponents must choose at least one flag bearer on the battlefield if able. So do you remember when we were talking about pingers versus shitters? Well, Coalition Honor Guard protects all of your shitters basically forever. And it does an admirable job doing so.
Yeah, that's a really nice one.
Those are 2 of my favorites. Ironically, both 4-cost white cards. I don't know.
Okay, I have 2 cards that some of my appreciation is based off of their respective limited environments, but they can definitely hang in a big way in Pauper Cube. The first is Pith Driller, 4 and a Phyrexian black for a 2/4 horror. When Pith Driller enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So you don't even have to have black mana in your deck. This card just costs 4 mana and 2 life for a 2/4. And you put a -1/-1 counter on something. Talked about the power level of pingers that will just kill a number of creatures, but also just sizing matters in Pauper Cube. So you have a 2/4 and you shrink something else. So that can do some good blocking.
I love it.
Pretty awesome in New Phyrexia for Scars of Mirrodin block booster draft. Still, I think, holds up pretty well for Pauper Cube.
Definitely so.
And the next card, I believe that this card is actually the origin of Cedric and Patrick's 2 good deals. Is Goblin Heel Cutter.
Yep.
3 in a red, 3/2. When Goblin Heel Cutter attacks, target creature can't block this turn. Dash for 2 in a red. Just a nice one to really mess up combat. It's got a good body. Got the surprise factor and a pretty nice rate, a good deal, if you will, on the dash side of things.
Very much so. I say I'm gonna pick one more. And this is this is Green's hallmark of what it really is. It's two favorite key. Do you know what Green's two favorite keywords are?
No, I have no idea.
It's power and toughness.
Oh, okay? Those are good keywords.
Those are good keywords. Nessie and Asp.
Okay. It's got those.
Look, I love Nessie. It's a 4/5 snake for 4 and a green with reach. But it also has monstrosity for 7. Remember how we were talking about, you want to do something with your mana later? This has monstrosity 4, so it turns it into an 8/9 with reach.
I do appreciate
you could very easy kill this, okay? You can Doomblade it, you can bounce it, that's fine. However, they're going to have to, because this then becomes the largest creature you could possibly have. And I really, really like this. The reason I love this creature so much is because, in general, in Pauper Cubes, commonly the largest creature is Ulamog's Crusher. Well, Nessie and Asp happens to have 1 greater toughness than Ulamog's Crusher 8/8, and you can just sit there while you get attacked by an Ulamog's Crusher because you can curve directly into it, because that costs 8 mana, and it's even though you have to sacrifice 2 permanents, it's generally a trade you would like to make. So
this card was apparently upgraded to an uncommon. It was promoted to uncommon in Conspiracy, so it's not messing around.
Yeah, Nessie and Asp is a pretty great one. Love that card. All right, any other ones, just great cards you want to call out for Pauper Cube that you particularly love?
Wrecking Ball is my last one. I love Wrecking Ball.
We
2
should
black,
leave it on
red,
that one. Yeah.
Destroy target creature or land. Talked about the bounce lands being good. You know what's better? Just a blast from the past, Dissension. Destroy your bounce land. Thanks for playing. I love that.
Oh, I love Wrecking Ball. That's good stuff. It's also just super, super reasonable removal. It's 4 mana.
It can destroy your Guardian of the Guild Pact. That's another important thing to have it around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Wrecking Ball. I've had Wrecking Ball in my powered cube many years ago.
That rules.
Like this is 12 years ago.
Yeah,
but still, I love Wrecking Ball. Just great. We had a lot better options in 12 years, let me tell you, but still. I think it's a good note to end on. Ron, any other notes about if you're playing a Pauper Cube or just Pauper Cube in general before we head out?
So I think we covered a lot of good ground there. A fact crossed my mind that I found kind of interesting, and I do wonder about it. I don't have any answers to why this is the case. But there's never been a Pauper Cube on the digital clients.
Mm-hmm.
There's been Peasant. We've seen the Peasant Cube on Magic Online, but we haven't seen Pauper, and I wonder why that is, and I wonder if we might see that remedied, because I do think that Pauper Cube is a really good cube to get burgeoning cube minds into the environment, because it's kind of the easiest thing. You can click a button on StarCityGames.com, get Parnell's SCG Pauper Cube delivered right to your door. So easy to get rolling on it. So that's something that I would like to see in the future.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. Get on that. Anyway, excellent plug at the very end there, Ryan. Much appreciated. You know what else we want to plug? We want to plug this mailbag article that we're going to be recording directly after October 31st, which means that October 31st is the last day you can ask us a cube-related question for us to include in that mailbag podcast. I think I said article. We're doing a podcast on an article. October 31st.
I think that you wrote article on the spreadsheet or in the notes here, but you said podcast and pointed out that you wrote article both times.
I did. Great. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent point. So October 31st, that's your last chance. Get at us on social media. Don't go to Ryan's house. Just Twitter, please.
Don't come to my town.
Don't even come to his town. If he knows you're there.
I will not answer your question.
I just won't answer your question, yeah. It's the worst thing anyone can do to somebody else. It's not a fate you want to experience.
No.
Anyway, you can subscribe to the 540 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, your local podcast app, anywhere you're listening right now. We, of course, love you to feed the algorithm if you can. So leave us a review, leave a comment. If you leave a comment, I don't know if we will see all of them. We'll try to get some of our producers to direct them and perhaps cultivate some questions for us if they're on places that are not frequently commented on for the mailbag. No promises, but someone is having to listen to this that's editing it and producing it at Star City Games. So I'll find out who you can hold responsible and then let them know. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter, which is where you can tweet at me. And of course, my other podcast, Think Twice, by searching Think Twice MTG anywhere you find this podcast, and Commander Versus every Wednesday on StarCityGames.com and the YouTubes. Ryan, what about you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Overdrive, and you can find my articles, which are about Cube, on StarCityGames.com. I have half written an article, and theory will be up this week. Maybe we get another Magic Online Spotlight Cube. There's no way of knowing until Tuesday morning, but you'll have to go to the website, StarCityGames.com, to find out what I wrote about.
Always teasing. You should never tell us. Never telling us what it is.
Yeah.
But you know what? It makes me go and check it out every week.
That's perfect.
Success. Anyway, as we've alluded to a couple of times earlier, we talked about Pauper today. Next week, talk about peasant cubes. That's right. We're adding a whole extra rarity to this. If you think you can handle it, come back next week. If not, congratulations. We'll never hear from you again. You'll probably come back next week, though. And I'm sure you can handle it. So don't be too hard on yourself.
I believe in you.
Me too. All right. That's the whole show. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you, Ryan. And we'll catch everybody next week.